with Steve Wolf in his hangar. Steve is building an awesome project here. It's a P-47 replica, and it's going to be wearing the colors, and it was inspired by
Jack Howlett.
Jack
who
Howlett.
was a fighter pilot that flew 104 missions in the 9th Air Force. The 9th Air Force were the guys living in the tents, and they had the Pierce plank or the metal runways and following the front along until they started taking over German airfields. He flew about 60 missions in P-38s and then 44 missions in Frigid Midget, which I'm building a replica of in honor of Jack, who became one of Kathy's and my best friends. Who's going to know the difference? I mean, you know, it's one of those things that...
I want to build a driver to drive these with the bend on them. All it look like a little socket, you know, a little socket with a hex drive. You have a notch going in and over. So you just would go over and turn and it would lock on this.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you look at the mite, I take the cowl off and I just go in there and just, I've got a screw sticking out with a washer.
No, to drive them in.
Oh, to drive them in, yeah.
Because you put them in the 3-jaw chuck, they wobble around.
Yeah, right.
But say if I'd have a little driver that could stand right over that and locked on it, and you could just spin those babies right in.
Yeah. You know what's cool, if you look at Kathy's bits, it has a composite cowl that's got 2 screws, it's screwed to the firewall instead of piano hinge. What's nice there is the seam is we just welded a little piece of 4130 on like this, like a little T on the end with the holes for these. And you just raise it up and you just shove it back using all, line them up, and then when you put the cowl screws in, it keeps that from coming out.
And what really helped me getting it in and out is putting some bolo on it. It's a wax based. It's a paraffin based.
Then it doesn't leak out. Like you did WD-40, and then Kathy always goes, "I'm getting oil on the windshield."
Yeah.
Because her cowl split top and bottom, see, so it's got a seam. And what's nice about that is I can take one half off and work on one side of the engine and stuff. But
Well, this is going to be a very poorly done video, but
oh, that's okay. So anyway, while you're videoing, look at the canopy here. Airplane Plastics, Jeff made the bubble for me, and I sent him a pattern.
here, hold that.
Oh. and I made a pattern of the bubble that he could screw all together that had this shape on the front. Because see, it's not a blown bubble here, but they blow it out. It comes out, and that's on the original that way.
Really?
So anyway, he made that. Of course, I had to build all the frame, but anybody that has an RV-8 will notice this little block back here and the back track. And these rails are RV-8. I bought them from Vans, except I did it different because I don't have a lot of width in here.
Okay.
But what I want you to see is when I close it here.
Works just like my RV-8. Oh, that's cooler.
And I got a flush deal.
Wow.
That I can just push down here, open it up. I also have Jack Howlett, was 100 years old when he signed that.
Really?
Yeah, and he flew the original the way I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint it up as Frigid Midget.
Oh, okay.
And if you look at the instrument panel, if you film in there, get a shot down into the instrument panel, you'll see it's got the yellow line and all the stuff. Plus the big old gyros that were used in the originals, except I cut the backs off. They're just fake face plates is all they are. And if you go down in this corner, you'll see there's actually the original P-47 throttle quadrant down there. Right out of an original P-47 with emergency warp power.
I'll get some on the other side.
Yeah, the other side did better for that.
This is very cool. Steve, is this a one-off? You're just
one-off.
you took a picture and you're.
I made every drawing. I've had to make forms to make every bulkhead. There's absolutely no kit at all. And then of course you can't 3/4 scale the pilot. So here's where the smart carry-throughs go, but that puts it higher in for, because it's only 60%. It's just barely over half scale. That shows how big. The real P-47 was 54 inches inside the cockpit.
Wow.
And this is 36.5. This is the same width as a Luscombe, or the early like Cessna 120s and 140s and stuff. So it could, if it was square-sided, you could have a side-by-side airplane.
All right, this is the coolest thing I've seen in a long time.
From down through there, you can see the original throttle quadrant down there.
Okay, there it is. Yep.
With all the supercharger and the emergency war power, and it moves the prop automatically if you do a go around.
Really?
It pushes everything up. If you're filming, I'll reach down here.
I am.
But you can see if I have the prop pulled back and you push up, let's see.
Let me get a better angle on that, Steve.
There, yeah. Actually, I should. Oh, here's a chair. I'll stand on the chair.
Okay.
You can do that. Okay,
Let me
so
see if I can drop this down in there a little bit.
there you go. So here's mixture when you get ready.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think I'm on you.
So you got mixture here with auto lean and everything, and then you got the propeller. But if you're coming into land, you need to do a go around. There's your prop. You just leave it there so you're not overspeeding the engine. Then when you do a go around, you push it up. It grabs the propeller and pushes both of them forward. Then
cool.
if you want emergency war power, which gives you another 400 horsepower, you actually, when you have your hand on the throttle, I'm using the wrong hand, your little pinky can reach back. It pulls this guy over sideways, moving this pin. Then you can push both up, and it gives you more RPM and more manifold pressure. Plus, on the top of this is a water injection switch. You pop that, you get about 400 or 500 more horsepower out of it.
All right. I'm no longer happy with my throttle quadrant in my 8.
And then here's the see a B, that's boost. That was the turbo supercharger. And I got a dowel in it so it doesn't move. It normally moves with everything too. And you're never supposed to allow the throttle to get, or the boost to get ahead of the throttle. That's what it was. Once you get up to altitude, then you can push this on up and it'll spool. This airplane, the last model, the N model, they could get a full 2,800 horsepower at 30,000 feet.
Wow.
Using that turbo supercharger setup.
Wow.
And that made it 30 to 40 miles an hour faster than a Mustang at that altitude.
Huh.
It was 479 miles an hour at 30,000 feet.
Yeah, I don't think jugs get the love they deserve.
What's that?
I don't think jugs get the love they deserve.
They don't. They don't. Well, you know what's interesting? They always talk about, I just was at the bookstore at Barnes & Noble, and there was an article, and it said, it was on the P-51, and it said the Mustang did all of this stuff, and it shared some with the P-47, but to get air, it said the Mustang gave it air superiority. By the time the Mustang came along, the highest scoring aces in the Army Air Corps all flew P-47s and P-38. So because they were in a more target-rich environment then, but they were going against more experienced pilots. But the P-47 did the job. I think the best thing is the old adage. They said, if you want to impress your girlfriend, you fly a Mustang. If you want to see her again, you fly a P-47.
Ah, excellent, excellent.
And everything, and it's even a fake mirror. I made this out of a piece of stainless steel and polished it and just made my own mirror. It's not really a real mirror, but
you know,
it gives it the look,
It almost makes me want to sacrifice one of my mirrors in my RV8 for you. I found a set of mirrors on eBay that I think came out of a Cougar jet.
Yeah.
And they're narrower and they just like match the curve perfectly.
I couldn't find something real, so I just made something.
Yeah.
And see, I got the wood antenna. Now, the originals were made out of wood, and they ran a wire whip up through them. And I may do that. There's a couple of Warbird replica guys that have done that. They drilled it and put a whip antenna inside, and it works.
Wow.
I may just have this for display. And they look like wood. They actually were painted brown or they're varnished and stuff. So I was going to have John Starr, when he paints this, we're probably going to put a wood grain on that,
Very cool.
And try to get it painted up as close to the original. But you can see how much work was done. Like the cowl flaps. I spent like 3 months on these cowl flaps. I kind of got it.
Let me get around the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see how, and I'm using Zeus fasteners for everything.
Okay.
So it has that look, and you can see all the seals and everything.
Wow.
And that's all controlled.
Let me get in there real close up. Well, if I can focus that close. Yeah, there we go. Wow.
There's a lot of
every little piece is made one at a time.
Like uses bell crank bearings. There's a bearing, one of those bell crank bearings for every one of those.
Really?
And then the rudder pedals, I copied pretty much the shape of a P-47, and it's got the toe brakes. It's got Grove master cylinders.
Oh wait. Is this elevation-wise? It's right.
Yeah,
right?
This is the floorboard.
So you're sitting in there with your feet sticking out straight in front of you?
Yeah.
Or even higher?
Yeah. No, actually, it's right about when you get all the pattern, you're pretty low. It's actually like the front seat of a J3 or a Super Cub or something,
Okay.
where your feet are out in front. But that's what I was saying. You can't 3/4 scale the pilot. So the airplane was not a mid wing, but it was a high low wing. In other words, for a low wing, the wings came out of.
Sure.
Just
It wasn't entirely underneath the fuselage. Yeah.
And another thing of interest, even though I didn't do it that way, if you notice, there's all my seams for this airplane run down the middle of the fuselage.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that's the way the real P-47 was. Even though I'm going to have a dorsal fin up here that would cover the seam, I went ahead and put the seam because to make it fast production for World War II, they built the P-47 in two halves. They had a bottom and a top, a bottom half and a top half. So, and then they had flanges riveted on, and they literally bolted the halves together. Well, I couldn't stand to make that much weight. You know that I have to keep it light.
Sure.
Because I'm not dealing with a lot of horsepower. So this is just 25 thousandths and stuff. It's built very much off of really RV6 drawings. But anyway, and some RV8 stuff. But so what I did was I made a wide piece in here with flanges bent on it, and I put the seams together, even though they're not removable. It gives it that P-47 look. So somebody that really knows the P-47 is going to look at that and go, wow, look at, they built it in two halves here. Well, it really didn't. And
Well, you know, there are not that many people that know that much about P-47s because there just aren't many around.
Right. And here's the turbocharged outlets. Now these, I've got it fixed. They're movable. I can unscrew it, take it out to do maintenance. But they move. Sometimes they're all flushed up. This one came up. This one went down.
Okay.
And sealed it. But it automatically controlled the speed of it. It was a dishwasher size turbocharger back here, and so the exhaust came all the way back, spooled up, and then the air duct went back to the intake. And it's a humongous thing. And so then down here, if you look, this is where the exhaust of the P-47 comes out. It actually comes back here, and the exhaust comes out, and this is a heat shield, which was stainless on the original. Of course, I'm not going to have the exhaust there, so this is just aluminum to save weight. And also, it kept the heat off of the tail wheel. Now, if you film, see where the tail wheel comes out there?
Okay.
Right in here. We can stay back just a little bit.
Okay.
I'll run it down for you. I don't have it hooked up to the main gear right now.
Okay. Wow, that's cool.
So it's got retractable tail wheel.
That is incredible. So drop it down again for me so I can drop it down again so I can get some detail of that whole assembly in there is very cool. Yep.
And then it goes over center and everything like any other retractable.
Right. So
And I tried finding a tire. That's a Titan. They use as a Titan Mustang. So
Okay.
It has a little bit of a World War II look. Nice wide tire, smooth
sure.
tread. And these just look like off a van, so I can use pretty much the plans for all the tail structure and everything. Now, all the vertical fin, the tail, that's all done, but it's up in the bedroom.
Yeah. Well, where else would you keep it?
Yeah, and like I got the cowl down there now, but all the fuselage has been all together with the tail on and everything. And I've had the spars in, but I'm building the wings in the next room.
So did you start by just drawing the whole set of plans to begin with, or you just start and you work on this section?
I really drew just a real 3-view, came out exactly the size of what I wanted, and then I sat down and you'll see the drawing, I got it on the wall in there for the fuselage.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, you watch it, you don't trip here. Huh? Yeah, those get riveted. They get pull rivets there. But what I found is Cleco's getting away. I couldn't put the flap on, and I found that if you have number 40 holes or 41s, they use 41 usually. They don't. A number 4 screw will just screw in. They'll strip real easy, but it's just enough to hold things together while you're working on it.
A threaded Cleco.
Yeah, threaded Cleco. And you can move that. I mean, I don't have any. I don't have it set right now. You can see where the actuator is very similar to like an 8.
I was gonna ask that if that's where it's.
And I bought a Vans flat motor and everything, but from somebody else sold them now. You might have turned them on. Somebody did.
So your aileron,
It's hinged very similar to the flap. I haven't got these pressed in permanent. They're just in it. Notice I've been waiting. Aircraft Screws had my bearings that go in here that I had this all set up for. They've had them on back order for like a year, and then they just got they were saying, "Oh, we'll get them." They're supposed to get them in at the beginning of the year. Now they're saying May, Aurora, and I just went, "Screw it." I sat down. I thought, well, these are made out of aluminum with pressed in, and I thought, you know what? I got some of these bearings, and they swivel. You know, they self-align it. But I'm just going to make a 41-31 instead of out of 2 pieces at 1/8 inch like this, like Vans does. I'll just make it out of 2 pieces at 1/8 inch 41-30. Weld it, drill it, ream it, and it really presses in nice and that. Plus, I'll use a little bearing seal, you know, and stuff. And then, of course, here's where the push rod goes, and that's why this one is so different. Is I had to have room because the wing is so thin here to run the push rod up to run the aileron, and I wanted this really solid because this is the driver, and then these are just along for the ride, as long as you don't get fluttered. But you notice I boxed all this stuff in just to, and then plus the skins, take some of the load off the skins.
how did you determine the angle on that? Was that off the original plans?
Pretty much. You mean this here?
Yeah.
Well, the P-47 has the ailerons the lead edge comes clear down to here. They're hinged quite a ways back, and then they have teardrop covers going over it. And so when the aileron comes down, I didn't want to hit in this area. So that's why I had this angle here. And
But was that a calculation that you did, or
Yeah,
was that
yeah.
off the plans?
well, kind of a little both. And the only difference is I do have the hinges up for the flaps underneath that are permanent. So I'll probably make little covers for that or just leave them. Depends on how ambitious I get. And the reason for that is they had it flushed in. But they had these triangle things that were Fowler flat things, and they had their own weird track. When I looked at that, I thought, first of all, it's a lot to do. And once again, I'm trying to stay 1,300 pounds or less if I can. And if I get carried away doing too much, there was a reason the P-47 was a 10,000 pound heavyweight airplane or 11,000 in that area, because they didn't, you know, General LeMay said if they build a runway that would go all the way around the world, Republic could build an airplane to take off on it. Because even the F-105 was known as, you know, the Thunder, the Thunder, you know, everything they build is heavy duty. I just riveted those up last night.
Steve, the landing gear are pretty interesting here. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah,
I knew you could.
I'm using the gear legs on it. I got my aileron sweaters here, but anyway, the gear legs here are off of a Titan Mustang. The Ernest Titan is a friend, and he said, I got lots of the earlier gear. I'll give you. They hold air pressure better than the new ones, the bigger one. And I didn't want 3-inch. This is a little undersized. There's one point I thought, I could glue plastic PVC over that, make it a little bigger and paint it up, but I don't know. But anyway, so the difficulty of the P-47, the reason it's a dual spar wing, you notice like an RV has a spar at about 30%, and then a false spar back here. And now I have the same kind of fittings as the Vans rear spar up here. But the wing takes such a change in everything, because look at the cord, it's 66 inches here, and it's tapered, it's an elliptical wing. But anyway, the tire retracts between the two spars, like a P-51 or an AT-6, you know, they come up here and then they got the angled piece in there to put the tire. Well, they put this has the tire between the two wings, so this had to sweep back 12.5 degrees from here to here. This is welded on at 90. So I cut their top off, and luckily it needed to be about 3/4 inch shorter, so I was able to do that. And then when it comes down, because of the weird angles, this is angled this way and this way in the what it bolts to, then it goes 12.5 degrees forward. So this gear down is actually about there because it's got 6-degree dihedral. So there's how it is gear down, and the tire is this way. Well, if you do so, the tire has to rotate and stay inside the wing. It can't get all twisted out of whack.
Sure.
Believe me, that drove me nuts. And it wasn't until I really looked at there's 1,100 original drawings to the landing gear on a P-47.
Wow.
I have access to all 19,416 drawings. And I couldn't build this in a lifetime. I would have had to start when I was 15 years old if I tried to make an exact replica and follow every little piece,
Yeah.
But having seen finding the drawing for the top, because it was mentally, I was thinking this had to be at a weird angle. And anyway, it said I noticed it had 90 degrees on it. And then it started making sense that when I figured it out, everything was 12 degrees or 12.5 worked out. Now, I used wheel bearings up here because Titan uses nylon sleeves.
Okay.
Those sleeves get loose. They wear and they get loose.
Okay.
So these are actually 1.25 inch wheel bearings, an 1.25 inch axle from this, actually an aircraft spruce axle that you weld onto like a Cub or a Pitts or something.
Okay.
And then you got this Grove Aircraft supplied the bearings and this, and I can tighten that down to where there's a little bit of drag, but it takes all the play out of the system, So the gear is really
rock
really
solid.
solid, and it needs to be because I actually had to notch this flange to get the tire.
Get the tire to swing.
Desser, watch it, you don't trip over that. Desser tires said that they can adjust my Mini Cooper tires that I want, and that's what's on there. See, this is a 10-inch Titan wheel, but they use a scooter tire that's small diameter. Well, P-47s had big tires. So the only thing I could find 10-inch that was automotive was a Mini Cooper, and this is off like a 1960s, the real early ones. And Desser, to get it to kind of look diamond tread, they're going to grind this part off. I've talked to them, and they're going to put a radius so it won't have this square corners. It'll actually be rounded off, and they can get rid of this and get a more aircraft look.
Neat. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Here's my gun barrels.
That's very cool.
And it's going to have, I got some strobes,
Yeah.
3/4 or 1 inch strobes. It's 1.25 inch tubing, but super bright, does 120 different flash patterns. I'm going to have one in each one and have it hooked up to the trigger on the stick.
Cool.
And if you look, if I pop this in here, whoops, it goes the other way. It goes this way with this. And I've done it before. Yeah, see, it kind of goes in. Let's see. Stay. Anyway, it goes in like that. Gets riveted in, and that gives you gun barrels.
Neat. That's neat.
And it's got to have those because that was part of what the P-47. I'll just hang it there. The P-47 was known for its firepower, and that's what it had over the Mustang. The Mustang had 6 of them. P-47 had 8. And there's a guy who wrote a story, Johnson, his first mission, when they practiced in Yuma, Arizona, wherever the gunnery training was, they were only allowed to shoot 2 guns. They'd wire because they didn't want to use up, they needed ammunition for the war effort. So when they were shooting at the targets, they only had 1 gun on each side working. So the first time he got to shoot all 8 was on a mission. And he saw an enemy aircraft, he comes around, and he said when he pulled the trigger, he thought his airplane blew up. He said it was so noisy and it vibrated so much that he thought a bomb went off. He thought he was hit. And he just let off the trigger and he goes, and I think it was a Focke-Wulf 190, and he just let off and he goes, holy crap, where am I hit? And then he said, the 190 just disintegrated ahead of him, just came apart, and he realized that he had just shot him down, and it was just his own guns he was there. Jack always
It's incredible.
Jack used his a lot, and he said, when you get used to it, he says, but he says he hates Hollywood Because Hollywood always has a guy in there shaking the stick like, he didn't do that. It's an electrical switch. He said, you just pull it and the guns go off. He says his wife would not go to war movies with him because like a whole bunch of the pilots got together and took him to Midway. You know, they had the new Midway movie. And the first thing Jack sees on the aircraft carrier, he says, that airplane didn't have round-headed rivets. And you could see it with the mock-up they did had full rivets. And he was bitching about, they didn't have rivets. He didn't even say about the holes in the middle. He was just like, that's not right, that thing. And then when the guy was taking off on the aircraft carrier, he was running out of runway and he finally reaches down and pushes the throttle. Hell, they went full throttle before they let the brakes go. He sits in the theater and just goes on and on. I had kind of first time when I watched when it came out, Memphis Belle. I went in the theater there in Eugene, sat down, and pretty soon I just put this one in when you showed up. You notice you can use 440 screws. We'll fit an 1/8-inch hole, but I can't get in here with the Cleco and still do the sheet metal. So sometimes I screw things together with those, put nuts on. Anyway,
you must have made a little form for these, huh?
Yeah, little forms. I got a whole box. I saved every one of them. Like here's some of the forms for those guys for the flaps. Flap 46. And what that means is 46-inch station. That was the one for hammering that out. But anyway, I sat down to watch the movie. Me and my wife Liz at that time. It comes on the screen and it shows these B-17s sitting out there, and it says April 1943. And the guy sitting right behind me is this old fart sitting behind. He goes, I was there then. I turn around and here's this old guy sitting there watching the movie. God, he had his 2 sons with him. And he was explaining to them, they were both firemen, and he was explaining to them, you know, and he was a bombardier. And he went on those missions and survived. In 43, they were losing a lot. That was during that time. So anyway, at that time, I had the AT-11, the Twin Beach, that had the bomber nose. We had the Norden bomb sight in it and everything. And I said, you guys got to come out to Cresswell Airport. And I got him and his sons to come out, and I took them all up in the AT-11. And man, he went right down in that bomber nose, and he was up there and you couldn't see a guy grin any more than that guy. It gives you a real warm feeling when you can do that.
Today's society has no idea what they went through to give us the freedom that we have today, and
nobody knows. 27% of the air crews were lost. You know,
it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's hard to wrap your head around it.
Yeah, and that's the way when Jack, you know, my first day I met Jack, he said, I said, so you flew in World War II? And he goes, well, we wrecked a lot of airplanes. And I said, and then the next thing he says, he could tell I wanted to hear a story or something, and what he did. And he goes, you know, I'm no hero. He said, you know, I did my job. He said, well, we all went over, we did a job, we came back, I went in the irrigation business, and here I am. And I was like, yeah, but it was more than that. You know, that every mission, he confirmed it, every mission was a volunteer mission. You did not have to go. And he says, I don't know one guy that didn't go. You know, or come up. I'm sure some guys might have played sick or had a rough running engine. You hear stuff like that if it's a bad mission, but basically no. He says, so when I have this picture of Jack leaning on the flap down here, one day when he was helping me work on the fuselage, you know, he helped me the first 2 years I worked on it. And he was standing.
So that's Jack standing right there?
That's Jack standing here with his 45 on his hip and frigid midget in the background. And I said, Jack, when that picture was taken, did you have any idea that you probably survived the war? I mean, you were 24 years old when that picture was taken. He said, no, you pretty well you're either going to make it or you're not. You don't worry. You don't even really, he said, I never really thought about death except one mission, and that was in the P-38. And we were at 8,000 feet circling the marshalling yard, and because we had delayed fuse bombs, we were peeling off one at a time and going in with about 20-second intervals. And he said, I was tailing Charlie circling. I watched all those guys go through in this marshalling yard, you know, railroad deal. And there were 2 hills on each side. It's kind of down in the valley there. And they had anti-aircraft set up on both. and you could just see the tracers just chasing the airplane through there from both sides. And I looked at, and he says, I know for every bullet I'm seeing, the tracer, there's like 4 or 5 more between each one, you know? And he said, it dawned on him, if you could stop every bullet and fly through there at 5 miles an hour, you're still gonna hit one. He said, he thought, this is the day I die. And he said, I went through there and I never got a bullet. There was tracers everywhere, but I never got a bullet hole in my airplane. And he says, we all made it. The whole group made it through there. Some got hit, but we all made it and got out of there. And but you just think of that, like you're saying, you know. I watched a thing that teared me up yesterday. I watched a deal that really teared me up, and that was this guy with Dream Flights out in Carson City, Nevada, and he goes around with a Stearman and just takes up vets. And he said most of the vets we're getting now, the World War II guys, they're in nursing homes. And we look for nursing homes and people that flew or was involved. They don't even have to be pilots. We get them out, take them for a ride in a Stearman. They said this guy was a B-17 pilot, and his family brought him out. And when they got him out of the car, they brought him over in a wheelchair. And they said, "Yeah, Dad lives in a nursing home, and he's in a wheelchair because he was on the Huckabee show, and this was his Huck's hero that he sometimes puts on, who he considers a hero." And he said he told the story. The most memorable flight he did in the Stearman was taking this guy up, and he said what was amazing is he'd been in a wheelchair for I forget how many years, you know, for quite a while, staying in a nursing home. When they got back from flying, his son brought up the wheelchair, and his dad stood there and says, "I don't need that anymore." And he had a big grin, and he said he lived 3 more years and never got in a wheelchair.
Really?
Yeah, he was done with it. That's it.
Oh.
He said it changed his life that much, getting to go up again and Mike does the same thing over here out of Kissimmee, and he was at Leesburg one day, and I asked him the same question. I didn't see this I just saw this show yesterday, but I said, "So, what's probably the most touching one that you had?" And he said the family brought this guy out from a nursing home, and he said he had Alzheimer's really bad. He didn't know who his family was. He didn't know anything, but he was a pilot in World War II, and he says I put him in the Stearman. And I had to really try to talk to him, but I didn't think probably he'd understand, not touching things and stuff. But he said, I took off, we got up, and he said the guy really was very unresponsive. And he said he kind of had his head down, we taxied out. When I took off, all of a sudden he said his head came up. And when he looked around, he had a big grin on his face. And he said, all of a sudden I felt him on the controls. So I let go. And he did turns, he flew around looking at the city and had just a big grin. He came back, landed, and he just went right back to the Alzheimer and not really knowing the family. But while he was doing that, it came back to him.
Wow.
You know, and he could fly the airplane. Mm-hmm. And that's like if you ever watch I Be Me, which is a Glenn Campbell thing. They followed him through on his last few years because he had Glenn Campbell, the singer, Alzheimer's. And, you know, he did his last year that he lived, he did 150 some concerts. And he could still do his licks on his guitar and play the guitar and sing the songs. But his daughter was playing in the band. Pretty soon, he didn't know who she was. He was watching his videos of deals of his family. And he goes, "So that's me?" You know, it's on, I think Netflix has it. It's called I Be Me. It's really sad at the end. He gets angry, you know, where a lot of people they get real angry.
Yeah.
And he gets and then he's singing the last concerts he's doing, reading the teleprompter. And in there, he'll be saying the words, and he does real good. He's got good tone. And then he goes, and Glenn does some licks. And he says them, you know, and it takes off to him. And then he did the same song like 2 or 3 times in a row, but the people didn't care. He's up there. He didn't remember what he had done and not done. But anyway, so Jack helped me work on it.
So he actually worked on this. He helped you with this?
Almost every hole you see in that fuselage.
Really?
He sat there, I put it away. Anyway, a little deburr, and he spun that thing on, and you know how many holes there is. I mean, a lot
built an RV-8. Yeah, I get it.
You're riveting either 2 or 3 pieces. So, I mean, if it's just 2, you got 4 sides to deburr the hole, you know, to clean it up. And and then he helped me dimple them all. And here's a funny thing about these World War II guys and stuff. Jack was so funny. He would come and work a half a day. He'd work the morning, and what was really funny was I'd give him a job, and he'd say, "Well, I've got to check with the union and see if I can do that." He's always giving me the trouble about his union, and so Kathy would always make him a sandwich, and we'd feed him. And he still was so sharp; he knew exactly what he wanted. I remember, he'd come up and have a sandwich. Kathy would make a sandwich. One day, I got a bowl of Cheetos. We had some Cheetos. I said, "Jack, want some Cheetos?" "No, that quick." Okay. I mean, he knew what he wanted and didn't want instantly. There was no delay and stuff. So after you dimple the holes, you got to dimple them. You know, they're all flush, and I mean that's like the tail hanging on the wall up there and everything. I mean, you're dimpling everything. And we stood over here with that big C-clamp dimpler, and Jack lined them up and got them in the hole while I did it, and he worked.
So the only plans I've ever seen every time I come over here are these couple of ones that are hanging on the wall.
Yeah, that is okay. This, I'm sorry it's so tight in here.
No, that's okay.
I'll let you finish your thought there, but this is the fuselage drawing that I built the fuselage out. I have to get back.
All these pieces and parts, are they just in your head, or do you draw them ahead of time?
That's a good question. Okay, so let's take this bulkhead here at 139 1/4 or 8. Okay, this bulkhead. We have that seam that runs down the fuselage, which is centerline thrust seam. And it's the way they build it on the original, so they could build 2 halves. Okay, so we take this one, and if you look, it goes down 15.5 inches, it goes up 10 1/8, and then sideways at 17 3/8 off the center line from the top view to the side view. And then I take a big piece of particle board, and I literally lay it on the floor here. Yeah, and I took the particle board, and then my famous, I bent it the other day, I think, a little bit, and I bent this part. I took my big compass, I bent my compass right where this thing, and I want to be able to, there we go. And you can open it up, it has a point on that end that you can change the angle, so if you're doing bigger, I can roll this down a little, like that, and then you stick a pencil in that hole. And I stick this I have a center line cross, 90-degree cross drawn on my particle board. And I lay out, I come up that many inches, how wide it is. And then I come up and I draw it out on it. That's how every one. And then I come in, like if I'm going to do a 2.5 inch one, I put a 2.5 inch mark and scribe it around. And that's how everyone was laid out. Now, it's an oval elliptical fuselage. So you're doing it, you got this cross drawn, just like you have here. You notice it's not as tall as it is deep. So what happens is you draw a cross, and then you go between like a kite. You draw corners like this to it, and you got your X in there, or your cross. You measure this, or you take this and this one, the cross one and the top one, and you subtract, like let's say this is 10 1/8, and this is 17 3/8. You subtract that, and it comes out 7 1/4 inches. So you come down the one line, 7 1/4, and you put a little line, and then you go to the middle of that and draw 90 degrees to it. And you do that all with a compass. You swing it, once you got it, you can go to the corner and then draw out here, put on the other one, and where it crosses is 90 degrees to that. You run a line through, and it goes clear through, and where it crosses, like if this is the X and it crosses there, you put the compass there, come here and come down to where you meet that line. Then you go to the belly and you come up to where it crosses there, and that's that one, and it'll make a perfect elliptical shape.
Cool.
The guy who showed me how to do that was Pete Miller, who was 89 years old at the time, and he designed the GB that we built, the GBR back in 1932. He was a brand new aeronautical engineer out of MIT. And even when he was 89 years old, the guy wore a white shirt with a tie. We'll see you later.
Oh, see you, Mike.
So anyway, that's knowing these guys that show you how to do this. And so when I got the original drawings out for the P-47, made some copies of the fuselage cross-section, I thought, I wonder if it's the same done in an elliptical, just like the GB. And it was. It was what they were doing back then, because they didn't have computers and stuff. And the cross-section was just drawn from that center line and stuff.
Cool. This is stuff that people
And
don't ever
let
get
me show you
exposed to.
something else in here.
Sure.
People go, okay, so you had access to all these drawings and stuff. You got to realize I'm trying to make a super scale, but it's
Yeah, my back is killing me a little bit, but that's all right.
So anyway, you want to sit in this chair?
No.
Okay.
Fine. I'm just all ears
So
here.
the key is, one of the things I did, I went out and I bought a 1/32 scale P-47 D model airplane. Here's one of the wing panels out of it. So, and they did such a beautiful, accurate job when I checked it against the plans. I just literally take my micrometer, like the flap in this, measure there and the length in this, and then take it times 32 and then times 0.6, building 60%, and it'll give me the dimensions. Like I can measure the chord here. I measured out where the gun barrels, how long they were, how far apart, the radiuses. Like this has a 46-foot radius on the original airplane, and then you take it times 0.6. But
It's entertaining that the model guys worked off the originals to make models.
yeah,
Now you're working off of their models to make kind of an original.
the GB, we actually used an RC, a guy, Vernon Clements, out in Napa, Idaho, was a GB fanatic with the RC model guys. And he made drawings of the GB that were so accurate. And he spent 1,200 hours drawing tree views and cross sections and stuff. And he had the paint job drawn down. And when I looked at the real pictures of the GB and then the deal, I thought, why should I redo it? I'll take his set of model airplane drawings and we'll go full scale and put in the dimensions and wow, you know. And then Pete Miller, who is still alive, you know, he came out. Anyway, there's the paint scheme. And while are you still videoing there?
Oh, the whole thing, yeah.
Okay. So
This is gold.
I asked Jack one day, and Kathy was with us, and I think it was during lunch. I said, Jack, how did you come up with the name Frigid Midget? I realize you're 5'6", but did that have anything to do with it? And he goes, no, not really. He says, it's just that when I was flying the P-38 in England before, he was over Normandy on D-Day on his 11th mission and stuff, before they switched to P-47s, he said there was a British song that had the lyrics, and in the lyrics, there was a frigid midget with a rigid digit. And when he told us that, we broke out laughing so hard. If you knew Jack goes, I wish I would have never told you. Now you're going to go tell everybody. He was so wound up about it, I finally said, Jack, I tell you what. I said, you know, I won't tell anybody until you die. When you die, then I'll tell the story. Okay, you can do it then, but not before I die. Okay, I won't tell anybody why it's named Frigid. We'll just say it's because you were a little guy.
There you go.
And stuff. But, anyway, that's the...
So did somebody paint this, or how did this get
I don't know
created?
who did this painting. Jack had it, and I just ended up inheriting a lot of Jack's stuff when he passed, and
No.
he
What
he was
an
my
honor.
guy. So getting back to the Union, so now he becomes a Dempler. So he used to get a sandwich and everything, and Kathy always bakes up some cookies. So he'd get sandwiches and that, one cookie. He didn't want two, he wanted one. So he got his one cookie. Well, when he says, you know, a Dempler, according to the Union, it requires a raise. I need a raise in pay because, you know, I said, Jack, you get 2 cookies now. How's that? Great. So
doubled his pay.
Yeah. So when he dimpled, he got an extra cookie. What was funny is when I had him go back and re-dimple, or I had to drill up those holes that hold the turbo supercharger in that square hole on the side. And I said, Jack, I need you to deburr these. Well, I'm a dimpler now. Union won't let me deburr anymore. I said, Jack, how about I need this deburred? And he just goes. I said, you'll still get your 2 cookies. You know, okay. As long as I get my cookies.
As long as you don't dock his pay scale.
Yeah. So one of my favorite all all-time pictures of Jack, and that was in the favorites here, and I'll find it here. But my favorite one is the one where he is actually standing in front. He was standing in front of the picture, and he's 100 years old in that picture. Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
And he always loved the P-38. That was his favorite.
Very cool.
But he said, I'm standing here today because I flew a P-47. He said, I flew through trees twice with that airplane. That airplane kept you alive.
Oh.
And that's why it had silver wings, you know. I have this model of it, you know. The wings were silver because when he flew through trees, he damaged the wings so bad, including the cowl, the prop, and stuff. They put a new cowl prop and put new wings on, but never painted them. So it was an olive drab airplane. And then and that is the serial number, 228677. So anyway, that's the story behind that. And then next time he went through trees wasn't in that airplane. That airplane was in for maintenance, and he borrowed somebody else's. And then that time he went through the trees and didn't make it out. He lost the engine, got shot out on a low level strafing thing, and he put the nose right between a bunch of trees. And he said the right wing hit first and went like this, went like that, busted through the trees. Tore the airplane. I'm just in the fuselage, and I slide out into the field on the other side, and I slid right up to the American Army instead of the Germans. So he said there's a lot of luck involved. And then here's one. There's Jack deburring around where the tail wheel comes out.
You could send me those when we're done, and I can incorporate them into the video. Because it's deserving of that. Yeah.
He always was that way. He drove a Chevy Impala that he bought, and he got, it's actually, he's leaning on it there. But anyway, the Chevy Impala, he's with Kathy. You can see he's just a short little guy. But he was 94 when he bought that, and he got the extended warranty.
He's an optimist.
He never talked about being old. You know, that was one thing. Oh,
I'm sorry.
No,
I kicked your bolt.
This bolt. And I use this because this door can shut itself.
It works.
Anyway, so that's kind of how we met Jack when he, after the war, he instructed in AT-6s about 4,000 hours in the Air Force training deal.
Wow.
And then T-34s, which he said is a lousy training airplane. He said a T-34 is way too easy to fly. They didn't teach a student anything. He said the T-6 taught him so much more as far as piloting. And then he said he liked the T-28 though. And then he finished up flying the T-37, which was a jet, a little Cessna side-by-side tweak. And that's what he ended up flying. And then in 61, he was in the Bartow in a CPT program, civilian training deal. So he's a civilian contractor. And then the Air Force took on all their own training. And so they shut that CPT program down. And then he went into irrigation business. And he put in most irrigation at Disney World. And Spruce Creek, the airport over Spruce Creek, he put most of that sprinkler system in. So he's an ambitious man.
Oh, yeah.
Extended warranty. I like it.
Almost more than, but that's what we wanted to do the project.
Right.
When COVID broke out, and they were talking about locking us up, we didn't know if we were going anywhere or stuck or what. And I was ready for a new project. And I just called Jack and I said, Jack, you need to live beyond 102 or 3. And he goes, why? I want to recreate Frigid Vision. I want you to see it fly again. He got all excited. Well, I don't know if it added years to his life, but he came out here for, like I said, 2 years until he ran into some health issues and stuff.
What an honorable way at the end, though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's excellent. Thanks for doing that for veterans.
I really spent some time with him at the nursing home was about 2 weeks before he died. And I went in, and he was just sleeping with his mouth open, and he was small before, but you know. Yeah. And Kathy gets to the foot of the bed. I walk around by where I can talk to him, and she's sleeping. And Kathy goes, Jack. She always did that, Jack. And pretty soon, he didn't open his eyes. He just got his smile, and pretty soon, he was happy.
Yeah.
But with this time, when he woke up and he looks up at me. He says, "You got to get me out of here." I said, "What?" He says, "You got to get me out of here." He says, They requested me. I'm supposed to do a test flight on the P-38. I got to take it to 20,000 feet to check out the turbo the superchargers, and they want me to do it now. So you need to get me out of here because I finally went, Jack, this is not World War II right now. And pretty soon he just kept insisting, and pretty soon he goes, he must have been dreaming it or something in his mind. But he was reliving World War II, and he wanted to, and I'm sure he did test flights before like that, where they did maintenance on the airplane, you take it out to check it out. And all of a sudden, when it finally dawned on him, he goes, God, I can't believe I did that. He says, I really thought I was supposed to go flying right now.
Yeah, well, this project is quite a tribute.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
The best part was Joe Finch, who usually comes to the AA meetings. He was a Distinguished Flying Cross man also in helicopters in Vietnam, in Hueys. And he and Jack got along. He was with Jack the day before Jack died. And he said it was about 2 PM. He died at 7 the next morning. And, in bed. And he said Jack was not really paying attention to him or knowing who he was. He was really out of it. And pretty soon, 2 of the nurses come, I call them nurses, helpers, ladies. And he says, the one lady had pretty big breasts, this and that. And they were going to change his pants. So she hugged him and bear hugged him. I pulled him up here with his head right here. He said, Jack got that smile. And then, where he wasn't even talking to me, he says, pretty soon he heard Jack go, I never thought I'd be in this position with my pants down again. That was at 2 PM before he died. So he still had that Jack sense of humor that he always had.
Very cool.
And you never knew when he was trying to pull a joke on you or not.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks.
Anyway,
thanks so much for all
Jack
this.
Stories.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to do the project. And the other thing is, even though I figured there's like a 5% chance he'd probably live to see it fly, I just want to come in the hangar and see it sitting there.
Well, he's going to be living for a long time through
hey,
this.
Jack, good morning, or hey, frigid midget.
And all the stories that you'll tell. He'll give what an awesome tribute.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Really neat.
I did a book on the GB that got published by Motorsports Books, and they had Barnes and Noble and all a bunch of things. But anyway,
well,
I guess I'm a published author, but
well, your fame precedes you.
I'll do one. Because not that he never considered himself a hero. He downed 1 Me-109, and then he did fighter bomber. He supported Patton's Third Army, blowing up, taking care of ground support, which was an important part and very dangerous too.
Well,
because he said everybody was shooting at you with everything, the 88s, the quad 20s, and he said, and then, if they could, they'd throw pots and pans up at you. There's
a series they started running. Now, did you ever see the Band of Brothers series?
Yeah.
Well, the same people that put that together did this new thing that's running right now on Apple TV.
Oh.
And it's called, what's the name of it?
Oh,
it's about the B-17 bombers in England.
I heard that they're running.
It's good. And when you watch that thing and you see the flak and the holes that, I'm sure it's extremely realistic, but I can't imagine. How do you not just die of fright?
Oh, I tell you what, I got to fly Collins B-17 and 16 flights doing rides, and it was 3 weeks before they destroyed the thing up there in Connecticut.
He said he got to the whole door and 25 back up to the ceiling, back down again. Wow. And then ended up in a tree. The locals took his gun.
Jack talks about with the P-38, he was escorting bombers over Berlin and stuff. Right. He said, I watched those bombers, B-17s, but I was so glad I had my own airplane on my own. And at that time, there was enough air superiority at 44. They said, we got over there. He said, I've only got 1 air combat. I had 4 missions. And he downed the 109. So they felt good about that. But he said those B-17s was